In front of thousands of people, Amy Winehouse suddenly stopped singing and started to cry. The microphone fell silent, her hands trembled, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, the entire venue held its breath. What happened next would become one of the most heartbreaking moments in music history. It was supposed to be just another concert. Another night of Amy's soulful voice filling a packed arena with the raw emotion that made her a legend. But on this particular evening in London, something was different. Something that would shake everyone in that room to their core. The lights were bright, the crowd was electric, and Amy had just finished the opening verse of Back to Black when she saw her. A young woman in the third row, holding a sign. But this wasn't a typical concert sign with song requests or declarations of love. This sign had just 3 words that would stop Amy cold. Thank you, Amy. Behind those 3 words was a story that Amy couldn't ignore. The woman holding that sign was Sarah, a 23-year-old cancer survivor who had been given weeks to live 2 years earlier. During her darkest days in chemotherapy, when hope seemed impossible, Amy's music had been her lifeline. Rehab, Love is a Losing Game, Tears Dry on Their Own. These weren't just songs to Sarah. They were the soundtrack to her survival. But what Amy saw in Sarah's eyes that night was something that would haunt her forever. It was gratitude mixed with desperation, hope tangled with fear. And Amy Winehouse, despite all her demons, despite her own battles, couldn't just keep singing. Subscribe now because what happens next will change everything you thought you knew about Amy Winehouse. Amy stopped mid-verse. Her band, confused, continued playing for a few seconds before they noticed. The backup singers fell silent. The entire production came to a halt. Thousands of people who had paid to see a show suddenly found themselves witnessing something far more profound than a performance. Amy walked to the edge of the stage, microphone in hand, and pointed directly at Sarah. You, she said, her voice cracking. With the sign. What's your name? The crowd turned. Sarah, overwhelmed, could barely speak. Sarah, she managed to whisper, though the microphone Amy was holding picked it up. Sarah, Amy repeated, tears already forming in her eyes. Can you come up here? Security moved to intervene, but Amy held up her hand. No. Let her through. She needs to be here. The audience parted like a sea as Sarah, trembling and crying, made her way to the stage. Her mother, sitting beside her, held her hand as they walked together toward the platform. Nobody in that venue understood what was happening, but everyone felt it. Something sacred was unfolding. When Sarah reached the stage, Amy knelt down, reaching out her hand. Their fingers touched, and in that moment, 2 souls connected by pain, survival, and the healing power of music, found each other. Tell me, Amy said softly, though her voice carried through the entire arena. Tell me what you've been through. Sarah, with tears streaming down her face, shared her story. She told Amy about the diagnosis that came when she was just 21. About the chemotherapy that made her so sick she wanted to give up. About the nights she lay in a hospital bed, headphones on, listening to Love is a Losing Game on repeat because somehow, Amy's pain made her own feel less lonely. Your music, Sarah said, her voice breaking, saved my life. When I thought I had nothing left, you gave me something to hold on to. Amy Winehouse, the woman who struggled with addiction, who battled depression, who was ridiculed by tabloids and criticized for her demons, broke down. She wrapped her arms around Sarah and sobbed. Not the quiet tears of a performer moved by a fan's story, but the deep, guttural crying of someone who finally understood that despite all her flaws, her art had meaning. Her pain had purpose. Amy Winehouse suddenly stopped mid-song. The entire crowd went silent. But in that silence, something beautiful was born. The band didn't know what to do. The crew backstage watched on monitors, many of them crying. The audience, thousands of strangers, stood in reverent silence as these 2 women held each other on stage, 2 survivors of different battles, united by the universal language of suffering and hope. After what felt like forever, Amy pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, her iconic eyeliner smeared across her face. She looked out at the crowd, then back at Sarah. "This song," Amy said, her voice hoarse, "isn't mine anymore. It's yours. It's for everyone who's ever felt like giving up. For everyone who's fought battles nobody else could see." She turned to her band. From the top, tears dry on their own. But this time, Amy didn't sing alone. She held the microphone out to Sarah, and together they sang. Sarah's voice was shaky, untrained, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the raw, unfiltered emotion pouring out of both of them. The crowd, initially uncertain, began to join in. First a few voices, then dozens, then hundreds, until the entire arena was singing together. It wasn't a concert anymore. It was a collective healing. A shared acknowledgement of pain, survival, and the redemptive power of connection. Comment below if you've ever experienced a moment that changed everything. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. When the song ended, Amy pulled Sarah close one more time. She took off the small gold necklace she always wore, a gift from her grandmother, and placed it around Sarah's neck. "You keep fighting," Amy whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "And when it gets hard, you remember that you're not alone. You remember that your story matters. That you matter." Sarah, unable to speak, simply nodded, clutching the necklace like it was a lifeline. Backstage, Amy made a decision that would shock everyone around her. A decision that would define the rest of her career. After Sarah left the stage, helped by security and her tearful mother, Amy turned to her manager in the wings. "I need to do something different," she said. "This can't just be about me anymore." That night changed Amy Winehouse. In the months that followed, she started doing something unprecedented. Before every show, she would ask her team to identify people in the audience who were going through something. Cancer patients, people who had lost loved ones, individuals battling depression or addiction. And during her concerts, she would stop, acknowledge them, and create moments of connection. The media didn't always understand. Tabloids called it erratic behavior, another sign of her instability. But those who were there, those who witnessed these moments, knew the truth. Amy Winehouse had found her purpose. She was using her pain, her platform, and her music to create spaces where suffering people could feel seen, heard, and less alone. Sarah's sign remained backstage at every venue Amy played after that night. Amy had asked her team to keep it, to frame it, and bring it to every show. It became a reminder of why she did what she did. A symbol of the redemptive power of vulnerability. But here's the part no one expected, the part that changed everything. 3 months after that concert, Sarah's cancer returned. It was aggressive, and doctors gave her days, maybe weeks. Her mother reached out to Amy's team, not asking for anything, just wanting Amy to know how much that moment had meant to Sarah, especially now that the end was near. Amy didn't just send a message. She canceled the show in Paris and flew to the small hospital in Leeds where Sarah was being treated. She sat by Sarah's bedside for hours, holding her hand, talking about music, about life, about fear and courage. And when Sarah asked if Amy would sing, just one more time, Amy pulled out her phone, played a simple guitar backing track, and sang, "Love is a losing game." As Sarah closed her eyes and listened. Sarah passed away 2 days later. But she didn't die alone, and she didn't die without knowing that her life had mattered, that her story had been heard, that her favorite artist had become her friend. Amy Winehouse never spoke publicly about that visit. She didn't post about it on social media, didn't use it for publicity. It was private, sacred. But those close to Amy said it changed her in ways nothing else had. She became quieter, more reflective. Her performances took on a different quality, more intimate, more intentional. The gold necklace Amy had given Sarah? Sarah's mother returned it to Amy after the funeral, along with a letter Sarah had written in her final days. In it, Sarah thanked Amy not just for the music, but for showing her that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that brokenness could be beautiful, that pain shared was pain diminished. Amy kept that letter with her always. She never performed without it tucked into her jacket pocket. And at the end of every show, she would touch that pocket, a small gesture that meant everything to those who knew the story. The legacy of that night in London extended far beyond Amy Winehouse and Sarah. It sparked a movement. Other artists began creating similar moments of connection. Fans started sharing their stories more openly, using music as a bridge between isolation and community. The idea that a concert could be more than entertainment, that it could be a space for collective healing, became part of Amy's enduring legacy. Years after Amy's death, Sarah's mother established a foundation in both their names. It provides music therapy to cancer patients, brings live music to hospitals, and creates opportunities for artists to connect with fans who are fighting their own battles. The foundation's logo? 3 simple words. Thank you, Amy. The story of that night reminds us that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is stop. Stop performing, stop pretending, stop hiding behind our carefully constructed personas, and just be present with someone else's pain. Amy Winehouse, for all her struggles and all her demons, understood that. She understood that true artistry wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. It was about showing up, even when you're broken, especially when you're broken, because your brokenness might be exactly what someone else needs to see to know they're not alone. The sign Sarah held that night. Thank you, Amy. Those 3 words contained multitudes. Gratitude for the music, yes, but more than that. Gratitude for the honesty, the vulnerability, the refusal to pretend that life isn't hard and painful and terrifying. Gratitude for creating art that didn't shy away from darkness but instead illuminated it, making it just a little less scary for those walking through their own shadows. Share this video if you believe in the power of music to heal. Subscribe if you want more stories about the moments that define us. And leave a comment telling us about a time someone stopped their world to be present in yours. Amy Winehouse stopped singing that night. She walked off the script, abandoned the show everyone paid to see, and did something more important. She chose human connection over performance, vulnerability over professionalism, love over fear. And in doing so, she gave us all permission to do the same. To stop when we need to stop. To reach out when we see someone suffering. To remember that we're not just here to perform our lives, but to live them, messily and imperfectly and beautifully, together. That's the truth behind why Amy Winehouse stopped singing and walked off stage. It wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing she ever did. The recording of that night exists somewhere, passed between fans who were there, a bootleg that captures every raw second. You can hear the moment Amy's voice cracks, the gasp from the audience when she stops, the silence that follows. But what the recording can't capture is the feeling in that room. The electricity of witnessing something unrehearsed, unplanned, and utterly real. Sarah's mother later told a journalist that her daughter played that bootleg recording every single day until she died. It wasn't about the music anymore, she said. It was about the moment Amy chose her. Out of thousands of people, Amy saw Sarah. Really saw her. And for someone who spent months feeling invisible in hospital rooms, that meant everything. Amy's guitarist spoke about that night years later in an interview. He said he'd played hundreds of shows with Amy, seen her at her best and her worst, but nothing compared to that moment. When Amy stopped singing and went to Sarah, I realized I'd been watching someone perform their whole life, he said. But that night, Amy stopped performing and started living. She became the person her music always promised she could be. The impact rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Within weeks, other artists began sharing their own stories of connection with fans who were struggling. Social media filled with posts from people who'd been touched by music during their darkest times. The conversation shifted from celebrity worship to something deeper, more human. People started seeing artists not as untouchable icons, but as fellow travelers on difficult journeys, using their art to light the way for others. Amy never gave interviews about that night. When journalists asked, she'd simply say, "Some moments are too sacred to talk about." But those close to her said she carried Sarah's story with her like a talisman. On difficult days, when the pressure of fame and the weight of her struggles felt crushing, she would think about Sarah and remember why her music mattered. The foundation Sarah's mother created has now helped thousands of patients access music therapy. They bring instruments to hospital rooms, organize concerts in cancer wards, and train music therapists to work with people facing terminal diagnoses. Every year on the anniversary of that concert, they hold a memorial event where musicians perform and share stories of how music saved them or someone they loved. Amy Winehouse died too young, her demons ultimately winning battles she'd fought so bravely. But in the years since her death, stories like Sarah's have emerged again and again. Stories of lives touched, pain acknowledged, connections made. Amy's legacy isn't just her incredible voice or her genre-defining albums. It's the permission she gave all of us to be broken, to be real, to stop pretending we have it all together. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember Sarah's sign. Thank you, Amy. Sometimes those 3 words, directed at someone whose art helped you survive, can change 2 lives. The person who receives the thanks, and the person brave enough to offer it.